wild card series, and you got a whole new ball game. So what we're asking now in the American League, you saw the playoff picture there and the teams that just were, close to getting in but were out. Can any of those teams crash that party, get in, and then maybe make a run?
Well, there's so many teams that are so close. I think the easy picks for a lot of people are going to be Baltimore and maybe the Angels because they've really solidified that ball club. But I'm going to go all the way down to the Texas Rangers. I know I've spent a lot of time talking about
That's 94 losses there, Ron.
94 losses. Right. I'm looking at, 15, 17 more wins for that team. Now, listen. Is there precedent for it? Yes, they're going to have a season like the Mariners did, like the Cleveland Guardians did, and that is they're going to have to win games on the margins. Base running, defense, they've got the pitching, and they're going to have to win a lot of one-run games. That's what the Mariners did. That's what the Guardians did.
I like the Rangers, too. I like what they've done. Last year, they go out, they sign Corey Seager, they sign Marcus Semien, they really try to address that offense. This year, they said, we forgot about pitching. We only got John Gray. This year, they bring in 5 new starting pitchers. They still have Gray. Odorizzi might be that swing man or fill-in guy if somebody gets hurt. But they have the pitching depth, which they haven't had in years. And I think when you look at that division, the Angels have gotten better, but they're by no means a superpower. The A's are rebuilding. The Mariners, big step forward last year. Can they continue doing it? And the Astros are clearly still the cream of the crop. But with 3 wild cards, I think the Rangers have put themselves in position to make a run at a postseason spot. And if they get there with that rotation, with DeGrom taking the ball in game 1, they're going to be as dangerous as anybody.
I'm going to go right to this. Okay. See the team that's 81-81. They were the biggest disappointment in baseball last year. I mean, they were bad from start to finish, still 500. If Tim Anderson plays, if Eloy Jimenez plays, if Luis Robert plays, I know they lost to Abreu, but the White Sox have kind of a massive production that's still sitting there.
They do, and they're going to have a better left fielder as far as defense is concerned, and the left-handed bat with Benintendi. That's going to really help that ball club as well. It really has been the last couple of seasons has been the injuries. If somehow they can stay away from that, if you look at the players they put on the field day in and day out, of course they look like a playoff team.
Okay, in the National League last year, it was the Phillies in a 6 seed that made the run all the way, won the pennant, got to the World Series championship. So here are the clubs now. Here are the clubs that made it in there. And again, it was Padres and Phillies, a 5 and 6 seed that got through. The monster win teams, the Dodgers, the Braves, and the Mets all knocked off. So there you go. You have an 86-win Brewers team, 500 Giants team. From there, who do you like out of this group?
Well, the Philadelphia Phillies, not only a 6 seed, they got in on the last day of the season. So you don't know what can happen. I do like the Brewers. Most of the time I try to go down a little lower and pick a team like the Cubs maybe who made a lot of changes. But I think for me it's the Brewers because the Brewers just have those 2 starting pitchers at the top of that rotation. You're still always asking for Yelich to go back to what he was like in 2018 and 2019. I love their manager. I think he does an outstanding job. The Brewers are the team I think that'll be in.
How about you, Mark?
I don't want to keep agreeing with you, so I'll go with somebody else. I was going to go with the Brewers as well because in that division, they've been really good for the last 5-6 years, and there's no reason that they can't get back there. I'm going to go with the Cubs, another team in that division. Same division. I think you look at what they've done this offseason, added Jameson Taillon to the rotation, brought in Dansby Swanson to play shortstop every day, hoping for a bounce back from Cody Bellinger. I think they've done some nice things to bolster a team that traded everybody away a few years ago, really reset, and now they're starting to try to come back and get back to where they were, from 2015 to about 18.
I agree with you. The Cubs, even though they're a big market team, they made a lot of nice small market moves here. Because Swanson is a good player. The money that they spent for him to get him, but Swanson is you're a better baseball team when you have Dansby Swanson playing short, and they just have a lot of nice players all around. They showed a lot of spunk down the stretch. You saw them down the stretch. They don't quit. I love their manager as well, David Ross. They're very good. I don't know, but can they jump up and get to? You just got to get to 87 wins, Ronnie. Maybe you can get in.
Yeah, Nico Horner had a big year for them last year. I do. I like their attitude, how they played hard all season long. A lot of things didn't go right there, so that shows you something. But I just can't give up on Cody Bellinger. I just think that getting out of Los Angeles, I mean, why would you want to get out of Los Angeles? You know, they went, but I think just getting out of the same noise that he was hearing, he just needs a fresh start, and I think the fresh start's going to help him.
We're doing the top 10 right now series, and that's one of the big questions in the outfield. Do you take a flyer like, look, Bellinger's not competing for number 1, but can you get him in at number 10? I'd take a flyer on Cody Bellinger.
Big time.
I would.
You know the talent's there.
At his age. All right, we'll take a short break. When we come back, arbitration getting ready to go, reaching the deadline, and some of the best players in the game are coming up. Mark on the players to look for in the arbitration process, important part of the offseason next.
Philosophy of once they exchange the figures, they go to a hearing. There are over 200 players eligible for arbitration this year. So we're going to see a lot of guys come to settlements on their salaries, and the ones that don't could potentially go to hearings.
That's an all-time high, right?
All-time high.
Why is that exactly?
My hunch is that it's just teams have a lot more young players than they've ever had before, and you know, you're seeing teams go with some of the younger players versus maybe a guy in their mid to late 30s, give the young guys a shot, and so they're just more young players on a roster.
So Vlad is one of those players.
Vlad is one of those players.
All right, Juan Soto is also up at that point. Look, he's not coming off his best year, but look, the resume is Hall of Fame worthy at this point. What happens with Soto?
So Soto went from $8.5 million in 2021, his first year of arbitration. He settled. 2022 settled at 17.1, so doubled that salary. If he had continued on the trajectory stat-wise of what he had been doing, we'd be talking about a potential record arbitration number for him. He did not have as good of a Juan Soto type year as we've seen in the past. He still led the league with 135 walks.
400 on base.
401 on base, so it wasn't exactly shabby. But he will get a raise probably into the $23-24 million range. But, you know, certainly where a year ago we would have said, God only knows what that number is going to be.
Right.
But that's not going to happen.
Speaking of which, so first-time players. Take a look at the first-time players that are arbitration eligible. Who are we talking about here that jump off? Look, Nestor Cortez off a very good year. Zach Gallen off a great year. Gonsolin actually off an excellent year as well. Will Smith is already one of the top players in baseball, as is Bo Bichette and Randy Arozarena.
Yeah, some really good young players first-time eligible. The interesting wrinkle on the first-timers this year is that for most of them, their first year was 2020, which, of course, was the 60-game season. The way that's going to work, the rule that's in effect now, is for these first-time eligible players, 2020, they will take their stats and multiply them by 2.7, which gets them to 162.
Okay.
And so when you look at it, Devin Williams, for instance, Brewers reliever, had 53 strikeouts that year. He's going to go in basically with his stat line of 143 strikeouts as a reliever from 2020. Same Zach Gallen had 82 strikeouts, so that's a 221 strikeout year for him to put in his arbitration case. So it's just an interesting wrinkle for the first-timers that's never been there before. Obviously, the pandemic, you know, they had to figure out something.
They didn't do any regression analysis, which would be likely over a full season.
Well, 2021 and 2022, they will certainly be able to look at their full one.
It's a larger sample. Sure. Like, there's ways of doing it anyway. I hear go to the arbitration. They're still talking holds and saves. Like, what are we doing? All right, so let's move on. The Brewers, meantime, I mentioned we're doing top 10 right now. When we get to starting pitching, both of these guys will be battling for spots in the top 10, Brandon Woodruff and Corbin Burns.
Brewers have 11 players eligible for arbitrations. The Brewers front office has a lot of work to do in the next 24 hours or so. Like you said, Woodruff and Burns, last year, 6.5 for Burns, 6.8 for Woodruff. They're both going to be due raises up to about $13 million. Devin Williams, a first-timer. So you look at all of these guys. Willie Adames, 4.6 last year, could double that this year. So the Brewers are looking at, they didn't sign a whole lot of guys in the offseason. I think Wade Miley may have been their only big league, major big league signing, but they're going to have a lot of salaries jumping up. So when you look at just Burns, Woodruff, Adames, Eric Lauer, and Devin Williams, those guys made $21 million last year. They could be looking at making over 40, 42 this year.
Why hasn't this been taken care of? Or like, I'm just stunned that this is going to a deadline when you're talking about the level of player, or like the Brewers looking at basically the most important players on their squad, that it would get this far. Like, is this just the way it's done? I thought they were trying to get away from that. Like, hey, let's settle this. Let's be amicable. Let's not be averse to each other, as we are still. Look, it's still a marriage. They're not going anywhere. You don't want to be battling your own player.
Well, and that's why you'll see a lot of settlements tomorrow or in the next 24 hours. Teams don't want to go to arbitration. You don't want to go put somebody up in a hearing
and argue against
and argue how bad your player is or why they're not deserving of their money. Arbitration hearings cause hard feelings, whether people want to talk about it or not.
Oh, yeah.
So they don't want to go there. Why is it happening? Because deadlines create action. And just like, why do we see more trades on July 31st than we see on July 25th? Because there's a deadline, and it's okay. We got to get this done today. We've seen a couple. Ohtani settled for $30 million rather than taking it out to the deadline.
Right.
It does happen from time to time. We've seen a few in the last few days, but tomorrow will be a very busy day.
Settled being just a choice of words, right? This settled for 30.
Well, right.
Decided that was good enough. Max Fried is on that list, too. What happens with Max Fried and the Braves?
Max Fried's interesting only because he's probably the most notable player on the Braves roster that isn't locked into a long-term deal.
Yeah.
He's the guy going year to year. Max Fried made $6.8 million last year, probably due for a raise over 12, maybe 13 this year. So he's going to get a nice salary jump off of a nice year. The question is, will the Braves try or be able to lock him in as well? The fact that he's gotten to this point, the fact that they're changing numbers or potentially going to a hearing or settling on the 1 year shows that he's probably not looking at going in for an extension, but it's certainly been the way that Alex Anthopoulos and the Braves have gone about their business. I'm sure they would love to get Max Fried locked up like everybody else.
I think they've been very smart with that tactic, right? I mean, the fact how they got Austin Riley signed up, it just gives you such, stability moving forward with your good players, and it keeps your own players in place. It seems to make a lot of sense for business reasons.
Cost certainty is a huge thing for teams. They know when you look at Riley and you look at Acuna and Albies and all these other guys that Michael Harris and Spencer Strider, they've locked up. They know for the next 4, 5, 6, 7 years what they're going to cost, what their payrolls are looking like, and you've locked up this really good core of young players that won a World Series. Or most of them have won a World Series in Atlanta. And now with that core of players and you build on the margins around them, you're going to be in contention every year.
It's the reason, supposedly, that you're in business. You win the title with these players. You keep them. The fans get to see the same players for, 10, 15 years. And everything works. All right, so there's certainty, then there's volatility. The Carlos Correa thing, we're students of history. Is that the craziest thing to happen in the history of baseball free agency? It's way up there. We'll have a timeline going back to the craziest things, landmark free agents decisions when we come back.